The Sisters Grimm podcast is intended for mature audiences only. Please listen at your own discretion.
Welcome to the Sisters Grimm podcast. I'm Morgan Freeberg.
And I'm Holly Freeberg.
I feel like every time we come back after being gone for a while, it's like that one sound that's like, hey.
Yeah.
Hey. How y'all been?
Hi.
Yeah.
Oh, hi. Yeah, I don't even remember the last time we put out
You know
an
what?
episode.
That's just the way that we absolutely do it, bitches.
Yeah, that's just like how we roll, and everything's fine with that. There's so many podcasts out there now, like, y'all can survive in between the ones that we do and we
For
don't
the
do.
new listeners who are just finding us, hello. We are two sisters who just had a sound on their computer.
And if you're wondering what that sound was, I don't know.
Neither. Probably an email. But yeah, we are two sisters who like to talk about all things grim, movies, true crime, anything strange. And today we are diving back into true crime,
Yeah,
which
took
we haven't done.
a big break.
The pandemic made it hard to research real murder, you guys. And
I thought so too.
we did a lot of movie stuff, and it was fun. But you know what? We're back on our bullshit.
Yeah, and as the title of the podcast suggests, we are doing Texas Killers, and this was actually an idea that Morgan and I had back in,
2019.
September. 2019.
Girl, I swear.
No.
Okay,
feels
maybe
like
not, maybe
It was
not.
2020. But yeah, so Texas Killers. Because we're
But-
like, we haven't done a state in a while.
Before that, we have a little housekeeping since it has been months since our last podcast,
And
which was our origin story podcast. Hope you all liked that.
Yeah, and I had housekeeping in my notes for that podcast. So my housekeeping is like
Real old.
real old and new.
Well, mine is new, but also not much, so I'll start.
Are you sure? Because I'm like chomping at the bit ever since I read this in the bathroom.
Okay, yeah, you tell me afterwards. But
I don't know if I'll be able to hold it, but
basically,
let's see.
I just want to talk about now that, there's a telemarketer calling me. Now
Movie
that
things?
COVID is not over, but definitely coming to
Things
more
are
of
opening
a, yeah. Movies are coming back, and we are getting some fucking cool-ass horror movies. Lots of remakes, definitely.
So many remakes.
But I recently saw the full trailer for Halloween Kills, and
really?
it looks
Good?
so good. Even though I thought that about the 2018 one and didn't absolutely love it. But we'll see. It looks fucking cool, though.
I have noticed something, and maybe our listeners have too. In looking, because I like to look at like every single horror movie that comes out like every single month, and there is someone, and I don't know how that they're able to get away with this because of licensing,
Right.
but there are like fan-made Halloween movies.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't really know either, but there's tons of fan-made movies like
But like
that.
they're
and
like they are legitimate enough that they have like IMDb pages.
I think it
I'm
has
just
to
curious
do with
about
like maybe
legalities.
like box offices. I really don't know at all, but
I don't know. I just keep seeing those, and then I'm like,
I also saw the first trailer for the new Candyman, and that shit looks good. Definitely takes place in Chicago, which I'm very excited for, because the original Candyman is one of my favorite movies.
well, it's just crazy because all of the movies that we're seeing now were filmed like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Like another horror movie, False Positive, that was filmed in 2019.
Yeah, Holly and I both have
I don't know. It's like whatever.
It was fine.
It was
There
fine.
was one more trailer, though, that I saw that I was really excited about. Here, you do your thing, and I'll try to think of it, because I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Okay, well, I have some movie things I could mention, I guess.
Okay.
Like, I saw some really fucking crazy horror movies, and some that I, like, had to turn off. There's this one movie, it's, let me just talk about my other thing, actually, because that is actually planned and prepared. So, back when we were going to originally do this episode, which I think was around September, our Starve Rock murder episode with Chester Weger, who was convicted and did his jail or prison sentencing forever, and he got released. And he's been, ever since he's been released, he's been trying to prove his innocence.
Yeah.
And so in September's, Jesus Christ. in September, his lawyers were seeking to have DNA re-examined. And so, like, literally just the beginning of June, it was finally granted.
Okay.
That the lawyers were allowed to send the DNA to a lab, and they sent it to this man named Skip Palahniuk. And Skip Palahniuk helped out with popular cases such as the Green River Killer
Whoa.
and the Atlanta child
Cool.
killings.
Okay.
So this guy clearly knows his DNA shit.
Right.
And so now he has a lab in Elgin, I guess, called Microtrace, and right now they are inspecting the evidence in the slayings of the 3 women in 1960. And they've got like a lot of things from the case that they're checking, and so I mean that's the most recent update on that.
Wow.
But I thought that was really cool because the last I had heard was that a judge was going to decide whether or not to grant them the permission to have DNA testing. And so when I was looking it up this morning in preparation for the podcast, I was like, oh shit, he not only granted it, it's now being tested by like...
So we will let y'all know when we
we'll
find
keep you
out
posted.
more.
Because I don't think Chester did it.
I don't know.
Enough to
I don't
raise-
think he would be wanting to check DNA if he did.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I mean, you can't double jeopardy, so who knows? But
No, but just to have your name cleared.
yeah.
But yeah.
The other movie I was thinking of that I saw the trailer for is the new M. Night Shyamalan movie. It's called Old. Have you heard about this?
I was going to talk about that, yeah.
This shit looks
looks
weird
really
and
cool.
crazy, and I think it comes out mid-July, which it is now July 1st, so...
Yeah, it's like this family
that
goes on a
might be the first
vacation
movie I
and
go see in
weird
theaters.
shit. Yeah, it's coming out at the like end of July.
I think like 2 weeks or so.
Yeah.
I think like mid.
The fucking new Purge movie comes out
Oh,
this
who
weekend.
fucking cares?
I'm not
Sorry,
gonna
but
lie.
I don't.
I'm not gonna lie. I watched around election time, so in November. For some reason, I decided to watch
Purge election.
Well, all the Purge movies I hadn't seen, which would have been
All of them except the first one for me.
all of them, but the first and second, and they're very.
You've never seen the first Purge
politically
movie?
No, I didn't watch those ones because I had seen those.
Oh, okay.
And they are like very like racially, socially, politically charged, but like also it's kind of just so
It's one of those. It was a cool idea. I guess a sequel was fine, but now it's at the point where it's like, let's stop
Now people
and make
are-
other things.
now people are just killing people illegally again, which was the issue before the whole thing even started. But actually, I think it's like kind of a bigger conspiracy thing. Like they're trying to get rid of certain classes of people and certain demographics. I guess that's the real like tea behind it.
Okay,
So-
this isn't a Purge episode.
So yeah, the Purge corner.
Right.
So are you ready to get
Let's
this
do
game
this.
going?
So
Welcome to Texas.
Texas.
Everything
So-
is bigger.
there's been a lot of fucking shit that's happened in Texas this year, may I say. I have never been to Texas, but let's get into this. I'm going to start out by saying that, at least with my story, Texas has some Florida vibes. I think all y'all Texas know that.
I will. I get
You get what I'm saying?
I get that. I understand your vibe that you get from that.
All right. So I am starting with a man named Joe Ball. Now,
Joe Ball.
I know that all of you horror buffs out there, Holly included, you all know about Tobe Hooper's first and most popular film, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is loosely based on Ed Gein and his killings.
Yes.
But do y'all know about his second movie?
Wait.
It's called...
Was it not the one that took place like? Or weren't there like alligators?
Okay, so you do. Good for you, Holly. It's called Eaten Alive.
Oh yeah, no.
Starring
we talked about
Freddy
that.
Krueger himself, Robert
Yeah.
Englund, and not to mention, back to Halloween Kills, Kyle Richards, who played little Lindsay Wallace in the original Halloween, and she's now back in Halloween Kills. And we also know her from The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. She was in Eaten Alive before she ever played whatever. She played Angie in Eaten Alive.
I did not know that. But Eaten Alive is
You've seen it?
Yeah, I've seen it. It's really bad.
Okay, well,
and
let's
it's
don't
a video,
talk about it.
It's a video nasty.
Is it?
So we have in theory, said that name on the podcast before.
Well, it's been a long time.
And you didn't watch any of them.
I did not. I was just going to say, I literally put in my notes, I did not watch this movie.
Ooh,
but
I
it
will
is
say, tangentially related. Sorry to everyone who hates when we go off on tangents, but this is related to video nasties. There is a movie out right now, a British horror movie called Censor, and it is about a girl who I don't know if it has to do with video nasties.
It's from
basically.
Texas?
No, video nasties.
Oh.
And so that was my connection to that. So it looks like a good movie. Is all I'm saying.
Anyways, the ADHD is relevant today, you guys, for both of us.
It's strong.
It's early in the morning, which is, I think, when we're both at our most chipper. Anyways, so that movie is based on the murders that Joe Ball committed.
I did not know that.
And it is even a more realistic basing than Ed Gein, because Texas Chainsaw Massacre is very loosely based on Ed Gein. This is
very loosely,
pretty much exactly
just
what
the skin wearing and the making of skin
things,
things like that really weird the really weird scene in Texas Chainsaw Massacre where that girl's just in a room with bones and a bunch of stuff.
About.
Well, no, but I mean that's the only thing that really ties Ed Gein.
Okay, so Joe Ball was born in the late 1890s. I kept getting different dates, so I just chose to go broad with it.
They do that a lot with people sometimes.
I got 96, I got 98, I got 93, so I was like, we're just going to say the late 1890s. He served on the front lines in World War I in Europe, and then when he came back here to Texas, he became a bootlegger, selling illegal, at the time, alcohol, specifically to those with lots of money, because he wanted money.
Okay.
So after Prohibition, the most natural job choice for him was to open his own saloon. So he opened the Sociable Inn in Elmdorf, Texas, right off Route 181. I looked, and there is a bar now called the Social Inn, but it's in Omaha, Nebraska, and it was very confusing to me.
Either they're fans of the movie or have no clue and it's parallel thinking.
No, it's so weird. So the logo of the bar is an alligator, which you will see in the story. Makes sense. But also on the website, there was a picture of Jeffrey Dahmer, and
what?
They're what?
And
their thing is that it's a new old dive bar with a killer twist. So I think it's serial killer themed, maybe. Because I also noticed that, it looks like maybe on the tables or coasters or something, there's, quotes from other serial killers. Anyway,
First of all, I would just say...
I just thought this bar looked really weird.
First and foremost, I would like to say that I do not condone the actions of these bar people. I think it's
a little weird.
I think that's kind of disrespectful. Also, that is so niche.
I know.
If you have a big picture of Jeffrey Dahmer... I don't want to go into the nitty gritty, but why wouldn't you pick a bar that he went to? Why would you pick the name of
the L&L Tavern or something?
I mean, I guess this was a bar run by
some random bar in Omaha.
Killer, but for Omaha,
it's very confusing, you guys. Anyways, the original Sociable Inn that Joe opened, in what year I do not know exactly, but Prohibition ended in 1933, and most of this takes place in the later 30s, so I'm guessing around that time. Mm-hmm. So assumedly, around that time. So he also, next to the bar, built a cement pond, which he housed 5 alligators.
Okay.
He then, it kind of became the whole thing that people would come to watch, specifically when he fed the alligators, because he mostly fed them live cats and dogs, which is gross.
Cannot explain how much I hate that.
Mm-hmm. So
Luca Magnotta.
So the Sociable Inn was known for 2 things: the alligator shows and pretty waitresses.
Yeah, it has a little I'm gonna fuck this name up, but the cutest whorehouse in Texas or whatever it's called.
Sure,
it has that vibe. The bar in the movie. I would also like to say it's more of a bayou that the alligators are in.
It's literally a cement pond he made himself for them.
I don't think the movie's like that. I don't want to keep going back and forth. I'm just
You mean in the movie
In
Eaten
the movie
Alive?
Eaten Alive.
Oh, yeah, I've not seen the movie.
Well, clearly Toby Hooper takes some artistic licensing.
Right.
Liberties.
So a big thing about the bar is that there were always pretty waitresses, but it did seem like Joe had a hard time keeping waitresses, and that it was kind of like a revolving door of new women all the time.
Red flag.
So neighbors of the bar were not always the biggest fan of Joe and his gators. Also,
sounds like a similar Joe who
I was
had big
literally
animals.
just gonna say. I literally have in my notes. This shit really gives me Joe Exotic vibes.
You told me that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Super Joe Exotic.
So neighbors would complain specifically about the smell of the gator pond, and Joe would threaten them with pistols when they came to speak with him about it. And another neighbor even said that he had to move away because he was so afraid of Joe and just how badly the alligator pond smelled.
How have I never heard about this guy?
Dude. So in 1937, a young 22-year-old waitress at Joe's Tavern named Minnie Godhart went missing. Her family was worried and contacted the police, obviously. Joe, as her boss, was questioned. He claimed that Minnie left town for a new job and had told him so. They had no evidence to support the claim that Joe could have somehow been a part of her disappearance, and so he was never arrested, and the case sort of died for a while. And so then, a few months later, another one of Joe's servers went missing. Her name was Julia Turner. Julia's family also went to the police to report this, and again, they questioned Joe. He basically had the exact same story, saying that Julia was having some troubles, and so she wanted to move to a new place for a more promising job. So the police searched Julia's home and found that she had left all of her belongings, which was obviously weird. Why would you move without taking your shit with you? So then the police questioned Joe for a second time, telling him that all of her belongings had been there, and he then suddenly remembered that he gave Julia $500 before she left town because she was specifically having issues with her roommate and she didn't want to go home. And again, there was nothing to book him on, so he was cleared.
Huh, that's interesting.
So over the next few months after the disappearances of Julia and Minnie, more and more of Joe's female employees were going missing. So the local police turned the case over to the Texas Rangers, who started looking more into Joe specifically and his bar, and found that even before the two different disappearances that were reported, a lot of Joe's employees were at the time missing persons. About a dozen people.
Oh
before
my
them.
God.
Which I think in the 30s, it was probably a little more common to have missing persons because, like, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have a lot of shit. You know what I'm saying?
People were just probably leaving and they didn't have any way to tell anybody. I get that.
But no one had reported these people, so maybe they just didn't have as close a family as Minnie and Julia did.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah.
Lone wolves.
So upon further investigation, they also found that both Joe's second and third wives had also not been heard of since what Joe said they ran out on him. His words, not mine.
Fuck, Joe.
So at this point, the Rangers were just questioning him mercilessly all the time, like constantly questioning him, but he never cracked under the pressure of questioning. Unfortunately for Joe, he had made a big mistake. He had witnesses.
Oh, no.
Joe's handyman...
Joe doesn't seem smart.
Well, Joe's handyman, when questioned, cracked under questioning and confessed to helping Joe dispose of several female corpses to the alligators. But he claims that he only did so because he was held at gunpoint by Joe.
That's got some Corrl Baskin. Ha!
Mm-hmm. It's like a mix. Sorry, I screamed that.
No, yeah, it's literally Joe Baskin.
Also, when all of this questioning started happening, the neighbor who had moved away because he was so afraid of Joe also confessed to witnessing Joe cutting up human remains and feeding it to alligators. He said he saw that happen.
That's some
And
Dexter shit, too.
And he said Joe had threatened him by saying, if you know what's good for you, you'll back off unless you want to become alligator food or if you want to be restaurant food.
Were these alligators ever questioned?
So I think the bigger takeaway from what I just said was that not only was he feeding human remains to alligators, he was serving it in his food at his restaurant, at his bar. That isn't like totally, but people are pretty sure.
Well, did he serve alligator? Like, were the alligators
I
there
didn't see the menu.
Were they there for? Were the alligators there just for pleasure, or were they also?
They were a
there,
show. Basically.
They were a show,
yeah.
so he didn't also cook.
No, never. So the Rangers thought that they had enough evidence to indict Joe, but they wanted one more thing before they finally did. So they went to the Sociable Inn one day and asked to search and examine the meat barrel at the bar. So at this time is basically when Joe realized the jig was up.
I'm
Joe
sorry,
went,
the meat barrel?
Yeah, girl.
What was this?
I don't know.
You know what?
It doesn't
You know
really
what?
come into question anymore.
I've worked at a butcher. I know exactly what they're talking about.
All right.
We had a meat garbage can. It's the same thing.
Anyway, so Joe basically realized with this questioning that the jig was up. Joe went behind the bar. He went behind the register. He rang up a no sale to open the cash register. He pulled out a pistol and shot himself in the chest and killed himself.
Ow.
Joe's handyman was sentenced to 2 years in prison for aiding him in the disposal of the bodies. After Joe's death, his third wife did end up turning up. She says that she was so terrified of Joe and the things that had happened, and she was worried about what happened with the second wife.
Right.
So she just ran away. She was never basically tried, even though people think that maybe she had a little something to do with it.
Possibly.
And the 5 alligators were donated to the San Antonio Zoo for the public to enjoy.
That is so
And
fucked
that's
up.
the story
Those poor
of Joe Ball.
fucking alligators. Imagine going to look at those alligators. You know how, like, at the zoo they have, like, those little placards, like, where they got them?
Mm-hmm.
And you, like, go over and you're like, oh, alligators that fucking ate people for a
So many women.
So were they able to prove from that barrel that there were dead bodies in there?
That it really wasn't discussed. I think him killing himself was kind of enough for them to
So they
realize that he had done it. And the
that's
wife also had, like, said stuff, and there was the 2 witnesses, and I think that was pretty much
So it was kind of
enough.
circumstantial, but I mean, the fact that he killed himself is kind of well, and there were
Telling.
people. He had people saying that he did it.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big tell.
Yeah, so that's that.
Joe Ball. Why
I know.
haven't they made that a movie?
They
Like,
did.
complete-
Eaten alive.
No, I cannot stress to you. Eaten Alive is essentially like Texas Chainsaw Massacre is to Ed Gein.
So who does Robert Englund's character? Is he Joe or is he someone else?
Joe, but
Wow.
he is fucking crazy. But it is in more of like a horror movie vibe opposed to what maybe like a serial killer was doing. Like it seemed like Joe, Mr. Ball, was killing them and then feeding them to the alligators. Whereas in the movie, Robert Englund was pushing people
into
the
well,
mouths.
we don't know the way that it happened.
We don't.
He could have done it like that too.
That would be
we weren't there, ladies
dumb
and
way
gentlemen.
to do it. Especially if he had a bar that was right next to it. I mean, I guess he could
and
do
neighbors
it out of
all
hours.
around who saw. He was not very smart.
I mean, I don't
as you
wanna-
said.
Yeah,
I'll say
So-
it. He seemed dumb.
No, he did seem dumb. That was a dumb thing to do. Most criminals are pretty dumb. Let's see. So my
Let's
guy
get into your guy.
is Dean
Should we take a
Corrl.
quick break?
Yes, we should. And I love that our accents have not wavered this
I
whole
can't help it.
episode. Oh, no, me neither. So, during the break, we're still recording episodes in our father's attic in his recording studio, and I was looking in the desk, and I found a token for Chuck E. Cheese.
Oh my god.
Yeah, which made me
That's scary,
think,
honestly. That's
Yeah.
cursed.
which made me
You
think
should get that out of the house.
of stuff. Well, it made me think there is a movie out, and I haven't seen it because I heard it wasn't very good. It's called like Willy's Wonderland, and it's with Nick Cage, and it is like it is a Chuck E. Cheese-esque vibe, or if you're familiar with the game, Five Nights at Freddy, which is like the original like making Chuck E. Cheese scary, and they may be making a movie. Like, they've been talking about it for a long time. It'll be a scary movie. It's a game where, like, you have to you have this job, and you work at, like, a Chuck E. Cheese like place, and you're allowed to stay there at nighttime, but you have to, like, watch all these security cameras and this crazy, like, bear,
What?
like, in, like, this, like, you know, like a Chuck E. Cheese-esque character.
I've never been to Chuck E. Cheese.
But you know the format, right?
Sort of.
People. Well, it used to. Well,
Isn't it just the big
I don't
cheese
want to get
guy?
into it.
He's a mouse.
Hollywood. It was this whole thing before, and there was like a show you could watch, and it was animatronics. But anywho, that's a whole other episode. So, my killer from Texas is notorious Dean Corrl, or the Candyman.
Ew.
Who is?
Speaking of Candyman.
Yeah. He is known for the perverseness of his crimes. So
I definitely saw him
spoiler.
while doing my searching, and I looked away and didn't read anything about him, so I know nothing of his sort.
Yes, there is also another player in this, but we will get to him later. So Dean Arnold Corrl was born on Christmas Eve of 1939 in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and his mother's name was Mary Emma Robinson, and his father was Arnold Edwin Corrl. He was the firstborn, and he had a younger brother named Stanley. His childhood was marked with similarities to other serial killers that we have talked about. He had a strict, overbearing father and a very protective mother who frequently fought and eventually divorced. Though they remarried after World War II and the dad came back, but eventually divorced again. Dean was described as a shy kid and not very sociable. His mother remarried, and they moved the family to Texas, and his mother and stepfather started a candy company, which Dean worked at. Eventually, Dean's mother and stepfather divorced, and Mary started her own candy company and called it the Corrl Candy Company. Dean was drafted in 1964 for the Vietnam War, and only served for 10 months when he was requested to be discharged on the grounds that he needed to be home to help with his family's business. But during the short period of time that he was in the Army, Dean discovered his sexuality and realized he was gay, and had his first homosexual experience while he was in the Army. So people around him at the time noted that Dean's personality had changed, and he was a little more open with his sexuality and would flirt and, seem to be, out and proud.
Okay.
He worked, like I said, at his mother's candy company, and he, like I said, liked flirting with younger men.
Mm-hmm.
So while he was working at his mother's candy company, he would give out candy to younger boys, like around 12-ish years old.
Gross.
And he became good friends with this boy named David Brooks. Eventually, the relationship turned sexual at Dean's urging, obviously, and he would pay David if he would let Dean perform sexual acts on him. He, of course, went after a kid who was in desperate need of money because his family didn't have a lot of money, and so he preyed on that.
Mm-hmm. They usually
Real
do.
shitbag move. Real shitbag move.
Yeah.
So Dean would have what he called glue sniffing parties, where he would give out free candy to
Children?
to children. So David would bring
Yikes.
friends over. He would ask David to bring friends. He was grooming David,
Yeah.
and then he was trying, using David to get other boys to come.
Mm-hmm.
If he wanted to be there, obviously it was a cool place to go. So Dean was also at this time getting more into bondage and sadism. One time, David wanted David walked in on Dean at one of these parties, and he had two young boys strapped to a 4-poster bed. But when David came in, Dean got embarrassed, and he let the boys go, and he told David that he would buy him a car if he did not say anything.
How does he have so much money?
Candy company. He's rolling in that candy dough.
Yeah, okay. Working that kind of a job used to pay big bucks, not so much now.
Apparently, yeah. Very true. His first known victim was 18-year-old Jeffrey Conan. He was picked up by Dean while he was hitchhiking from the University of Texas to his parents' house in August of 1970. He was strangled and asphyxiated with a cloth towel, and he was buried at a nearby beach underneath a very large boulder. He was covered in a layer of lime. He was naked and wrapped in plastic, and his hands were bound to his feet,
This was
suggesting
David?
sexual abuse. No, this was not David.
Oh,
This
okay.
was his first victim, who was
Okay.
this 18-year-old. Dean's sadistic bloodlust led him to offer David $200, which in this time was quite a bit of money, for every boy that he could bring him. In the beginning, he said he was part of a white slavery ring.
That's what he, because David obviously was like, I have questions. Why do you want boys? And Dean was basically like, I'm in this ring of people who sell white boys.
But soon it became obvious.
The American government?
Franklin credit cover up. But soon it became obvious that Dean was killing these boys. They would pick their victims from like seedier areas around Houston, preying on boys whose disappearances were written off as runaways by the local police. So in
What years
December,
was this again?
70s. So
It was so easy to kill back in the day, y'all.
Too easy. Too
Too fucking easy.
Especially getting away with it with DNA. They're like, I don't know. He has
Yeah.
a positive.
Right.
On December in 1970, David Brooks lured 14-year-old James Glass and Danny Yates away from a religious rally that the two were attending. So they were just at youth group hanging out, and this kid lured them away. Dean had created a torture board with holes to put ropes through to strap down his victims while he would rape and torture them. Kind of similar to what
John Wayne Gacy did.
he had a board too. So both of these boys were strangled and then buried in a boat shed that was rented by Dean. 6 weeks later, in January of 1971, David Brooks and Corrl encountered 15 and 14-year-old brothers Donald and Jerry Waldrop as they were walking home from a friend's house. Dean lured them into his van, and they drove to Dean's apartment and were raped, tortured, and they were also buried in the boat shed. In May of 1971, Corrl abducted, along with David, who helped, 15-year-old Randall Harvey, who was last seen by his family riding his bike to his job at a gas station. He was put into Dean's van and brought back to the apartment, where he was tortured and raped before being killed with a single gunshot to the head, and he was also buried in the boat shed. May of 1971, 13-year-old David Hillengeist, and 16-year-old Gregory Malley Winkle were abducted, raped, and tortured, and were killed together and buried in the boat shed, which at this point is getting pretty full of dead bodies. So not all of these boys were written off as runaways. At least some of their families were looking for them, as in the case with David and Gregory, as well as Jeffrey, his first victim, and their families were all frantically looking, for their sons and these children. So in August of 1971, 17-year-old Reuben Watson Haney was walking home from a movie theater when David Brooks encountered him and persuaded Reuben to go to a party at Dean's apartment. Reuben agreed, but when he got there, he met the same fate as all the boys before him. So in the winter of 1971, David introduced Corrl to Elmer Wayne Henley.
And if you are familiar with the TV show Mindhunter, they visit him in the second season.
Ooh.
Yes.
I didn't see the second season.
He was originally lured to Dean's as an intended victim.
Is Dean in that show at all?
No.
Okay.
And you'll find out why.
All right.
So he was originally lured to Dean's as an intended victim, but then Dean decided that Elmer would make a better accomplice.
How old was Elmer?
Elmer was...
Young?
He was pretty young.
Okay.
He
Like
was pretty
16
young.
or 17 or something?
Yeah, and that I'm not sure why I don't have it written down, but yeah, he was in that range.
Okay.
He was around the same age as like David, who was probably around 16, 17 at this age. Obviously, Dean was no longer probably sexually attracted to David at this time. Maybe a little, I don't know.
Who
But he
knows?
liked younger guys.
Yeah.
So in February of 1972, first,
Dean offered, Henley this offer to like take boys. He was like, no.
no thank you, that sounds bad. And then Dean was like, how about I give you $200 for every boy? And so then he agreed because his family was struggling financially. So now in February of 1972, Henley helped Corrl abduct 17-year-old William Branch. Elmer says that Dean told him that William was sold to a sex trafficking ring, but when William got to Dean's home, he was tied to the board and raped. He was castrated and then shot and buried in the boat shed. March of 1972, Frank Aguirre was lured to Dean's with the promise of smoking some pot, but instead was raped, tortured, and murdered. On 4/20 of 1972, Mark Scott, 17, a friend of both Henley and David Brooks, so they were cool with one another. He was forced into the van to go to Dean's, and Mark tried to pick up a fight and even tried stabbing them with a knife, and then he saw that Henley was pointing a gun at his head and just gave up because he knew. And then he was tortured, raped, and murdered, which is really fucked up. There's so many that I'm having to say those words so many times. It's really fucking upsetting. Because of the victims. So, May of 1972, 16-year-old Johnny DeLone and Billy Balch were abducted. Johnny was last seen walking with his friend to a local store, and Billy was a farm worker at Corrl Candy Company. And both were tortured, raped, and killed by Corrl. So, Corrl, Henley, and Brooks then abducted 19-year-old Billy Ridinger. He was tied to the board and he was tortured and abused by Corrl, but later Brooks said that he was able to persuade Dean to let Billy go. Once, when Brooks was entering Dean's home, Dean knocked him unconscious and then tied him to a bed and repeatedly raped him. He released him, and despite the attack, Brooks kept helping Dean. So that was just like a weird incident that happened.
Yeah.
Like him probably just being like, remember who's in charge here. In July of 1972.
And he's still a pretty young kid, so.
Yeah, I mean, he's still young. 17-year-old Steven Sickman was last seen leaving a party. He was abducted and severely bludgeoned that fractured several ribs, strangled with a nylon cord, and then was ultimately buried at the boat shed. October of 1972, Wally J. Simono, 14 years old, was walking to his junior high school when he was abducted. While he was at Dean's, he tried calling his mom for help before the phone was disconnected, and then he was killed and buried in the boat shed. That same day, Richard Hembry, 13, was also abducted, and they shot him, and he was strangled. November of 1972, Richard Kepner, 19, went missing while he was on his way to call his fiancée at a payphone. He was then raped, tortured, strangled to death, and was buried in the boathouse.
Is it just a lot more of this?
Unfortunately, yeah. And then
Maybe
it starts to get...
We skip past some of it, because I don't think we need to just keep hearing about every single one.
So, let's see. So, after Richard, he killed in February of 1973, June 4th of 1973, June 15th of 1973, July of 1973, again in July of 1973.
So he
a
was
lot in July of
rampage
So yeah,
hard.
towards the end of July of 1973, he was pretty fucking busy. So yeah, he killed
and that's not to discount any of these victims.
No, of course not. But it's also not like super beneficial for us to keep just saying this person was this, this, and this.
Yeah, no. It becomes
rude after a while. I'm glad you stopped me.
Yeah.
There's no story in that. He killed
There's absolutely
all of these
no.
poor
Let's
boys.
just keep going with what happened.
Yeah. So, and then this is where things start to get not interesting, but a little, not so much murders. So, on the evening of August 7th, 1973, Henley invited Timothy Corrl, who was 19, to a party at Corrl's. He was intended to be Dean's next victim. Henley and Timothy went out around midnight, and they ran into their friend Rhonda Williams, who they found like in the street, and she had been fighting with her father, and she, they were friends, and she's like, I don't feel comfortable going back into the house with my dad. Can I please come with you? And they were like, of course. So they told her to come with, and then they went back to Corrl's home, and they all went to bed. Early in the morning the next day, though, Dean was fucking so mad that they had brought a girl into the house and kept yelling at them and telling them that they had ruined everything. Henley explained how Rhonda had been fighting with her father and didn't want to go back home, and they didn't really have any other choice. And Dean relaxed a little, and they all smoked some pot, and they sniffed some glue, and then they all passed out.
Okay.
So Henley woke up and found himself lying on his stomach, and Dean was putting handcuffs on his wrists. Curly and Rhonda were tied up next to him on the floor. They were bound with nylon rope, gagged with duct tape, and were lying face down on the floor, and Curly had been stripped naked. Seeing that Henley was awake, Dean removed the gag, and Henley started freaking out on Dean, and Dean said that he was mad that he had brought a girl back to his house, and he was going to kill all three of the teenagers, but he was going to rape Curly first. So Henley tried talking Dean down, saying he would help him with torturing and killing the other two if Dean would untie him, which Dean did, and they tied Curly and Rhonda to the board. Dean gave Henley a hunting knife and ordered him to cut off Rhonda's clothes and told him that they were going to rape her, or he was going to rape her while he raped Curly. Curly and Rhonda then eventually woke up. They started freaking out. Rhonda seems like a girl who's like, don't fucking fuck with me, motherfucker.
Go off, bitch.
And Henley asked if he could bring Rhonda into another room, but Dean ignored him, so Henley grabbed Corrl's pistol and said, Dean, you've gone too far, and enough is enough. Dean walked towards Henley and was like, kill me. Like, just kill me then. Like, pussy. Like, you think you can kill me? Do it. And Henley, like, marched at him and shot him. Killed him. And so he untied Rhonda and Curly, and he told them to leave. And then Curly was like, let's call the police. Henley called the police, and he told them that he had just killed a man. The police were like, don't you want to hear your Miranda rights? And Henley was like, no, I need to get all of this off of my chest. So he confessed to everything.
Dang.
Everything, saying that he was coerced by Dean, and he showed the police where they had buried all of the bodies. Inside the boat shed, police found a stolen car, a child's bike, a large iron drum, water containers, 2 sacks of lime, and a large plastic bag full of teenage boys' clothing.
Oh, no.
They dug through the earth in the boat shed and found the remains of victims in various stages of decomposition. Most bodies had been wrapped in thick, clear plastic sheeting. All of the victims had found to have signs of sexual torture. Their pubic hair had been plucked out. This is all just gross stuff. I'm not reading this. I'm not reading this.
Oh, my God. Plucked.
It was disgusting. They did fucked up shit. I'm not reading it. I'm not reading this either because it's gross. So the total number of Corrl's victims remains unknown. Henley was indicted and found guilty for 6 of these murders. So in Mindhunter, Dean's not there because
he's dead.
Henley killed him.
Did they talk about him, though?
Yeah.
Ooh.
I mean, because
I should really watch the second season.
It's good. I don't know why they stopped. In
they
court,
were all just over it.
So in court, David Brooks tried portraying himself as a silent partner to the crimes and said only Henley was present at the time of the rapes and murders. But he ended up being indicted for murders and was found guilty of one.
David?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they were both sentenced to life in prison.
Damn.
Yep.
That's fucked up and gross. That's a really bad one. But Mindhunter, y'all, if you've watched that,
Yeah, if you
now
want to know a
that
little
story
more.
a little more.
Yeah, and if you go and watch it now, you'll understand a little more. I mean, like, Henley was in no means an innocent little angel.
No, definitely not.
But he was groomed.
Yeah.
But, I mean, still.
And trauma
culpability.
can make you do some really fucked up shit.
Oh my god, yeah.
Is David in Mindhunter at all or no?
No, because they go and visit Henley specifically because they're trying to get him to talk about the abuse that he suffered from Corrl, and that's when they realize that like he is more innocent than they're making it seem.
At least in the
kinda.
show, yeah.
In the show, at least. So yeah, that was our Texas Killers episode.
Yeah, guys, we did it. We got through a true crime episode, and we both don't hate ourselves.
And mine was yucky.
Yeah, mine wasn't like cute by any means.
So, really dope documentary y'all should watch. If you guys are into true crime, if you are into shipwrecks, go on Discovery Plus. There is a 6-part documentary about the Estonia, which was a ferry cruiser that sank in the 90s in the Baltic Sea. And that's all I'm going to say. And you guys should watch it. It has crazy... It's bonkers. It's absolutely bonkers. Because I was like, shipwreck? Why is this in the true crime section? And then I watched it and I was like, rad. Also, I'm watching this documentary about North Korea, and there are some things that happen, some like true crimey-ish things,
yeah.
like mysterious things that I didn't know about and crazy. Absolutely crazy. So, yeah, follow us on the Sisters Grim Podcast.
Yes.
At the Sister Grim Podcast.
Next episode, we'll have a little announcement of something, but we will get to it, next episode. And good night.